don't know how, but it's 2024 and we're still getting Arkham games. Now that's not a complaint, mind you, but it is something that should be stated. The constant phrase people have always used when talking about the Arkham games is that the games make you feel like you're actually Batman. Well, this particular game takes that phrase all too literally, as you play as Batman in first person in virtual reality, with this game being this universe's second outing in VR. Batman Arkham Shadow is the latest installment into the surprisingly still ongoing Arkhamverse, taking place between the events of Arkham Origins and Arkham Asylum. Being as such, it sees several series stars return to their roles. Arkham Origins actor Roger Craig Smith once again plays Batman. Tara Strong, as always, is Harley Quinn. Martin Jarvis is back as Alfred. And Troy Baker is a pre-Two-Face Harvey Dent. New cast inclusions include Chelsea Kane as Barbara Gordon, Mark Ralston as Commissioner Gordon, and Elijah Wood of all people as a pre-Scarecrow Jonathan Crane, just to name a few. Carmine Falcone's name was spoken before. The character did make an appearance in the now defunct Arkham Underworld game, but this is the Don's first official inclusion into Arkham. The game also serves as the first appearance of several on screen. The ventriloquist had been mentioned before. His dummy Scarface has already made an appearance once or twice in the franchise in the past. But this is the first game where he's actually a visual character. Likewise, the same could be said for Ratcatcher. He's now seen and not just spoken of. Leslie Tompkins had gotten mentioned before in the comics, but this is the first time she's actually appeared in a game, showing the importance that she had early on in Bruce's life, being the only other person other than Alfred to be in on his deepest, darkest secret. She became a more motherly presence in Bruce's life after his parents' passing. Their relationship is very endearing, and this game really makes it feel integral to the character. Arkham Shadow also sees a lot of new additions to this Batman's already stacked rogues gallery, with the big bad of the game being the Rat King. He's not what you would call an A-list villain. As a matter of fact, he's hardly a villain, but here he is the villain. A cult leader who sends his rats out to do his dirty work. Someone who is often absent in attendance, but whose presence is always present. We'll get into why a little later on. Though my personal favorite new inclusion would probably have to be Lyle Bolton, better known to some Batman fans as Lockup. He's a loudmouth, unhinged brute who seeks justice in the most brutal of ways, utilizing terrorist-like tactics when punishing prisoners. He runs a regime that feels more like a reign of terror. All of these characters feel like worthwhile additions. All of them feel like they belong in this universe that they're a part of. Some of these inclusions, as a matter of fact, are so seamless that it made me, an avid fan of the franchise, question if they were somehow there all along. And that's far from all the rogues that this outing offers, with plenty of other notable names and costume criminals to meet behind bars. You got Bronze Tiger from Arkham Origins Blackgate, Black Mask from Arkham Origins, and Firefly from Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight. Even a lot of the cops that you encounter in these games appear here as well. Maybe most notably being Brandon from Arkham Origins, and Bowles from Arkham Asylum. Now I'm just touching base on a lot of these plot points right now. I will be going into depth with them in just a moment, but before I get any further into the plot, let me be brutally honest about this game. I'm not really into the whole VR thing. It's not my thing. I understand the appeal, but it doesn't appeal to me. So I'm probably not the right audience for this to begin with. Having said that, in spite of that, I do still think this game is a lot of fun and worth the playthrough. In all honesty, it's probably one of the best looking VR games I've ever seen. Now cynically, I think this game was only made to get people interested in the console it came out on. This next Arkham game is only in this one place. Your favorite franchise has a new release, and this is the only place you can get it. On this system you might not have gotten otherwise. In spite of itself, this can be really good, and at times, even great. Arkham Shadow is a return to form for the franchise. It adds layers to the already layered tragedy of Arkham, focusing heavily on elements of the franchise that have either gone understated or have gone completely unspoken, introducing new characters to the mythos, giving attention to the less used characters. My biggest fear going into this game was that it would be a cheap cash-in that didn't have a story to tell. It'd be a forced experience that was just relying on the success of the Arkham brand name. And that's the mindset I went into this game with. But by the end of it, I saw that there was a lot of merit in the making of this new edition. Everything about this game feels like it was well thought out. It's an interesting side story set in a wider, more well-known universe, and it kind of succeeds in every way that you would want one of these games to succeed. Because it ends up being a good story on its own, but its contents also add to the bigger picture. There's surprisingly a lot of substance to this installment. The Rise of the Rat King promises the death of several public officials on what his followers are calling the Day of Wrath. Victims include, but are not limited to, Batman's greatest ally Jim Gordon, and Bruce Wayne's best friend Harvey Dent. Looking for answers, Bruce goes incognito to infiltrate Blackgate Prison. Playing the part of conman and arsonist, Matches Malone. It's there he sees the horrific nature of the system in place, watching as a power struggle ensues between the one-day lockup and Carmine Falcone, between the future Scarecrow and the one-day Harley Quinn, as their very different approaches to patient care have divided the asylum into two separate wings. Fair warning, we're now in spoiler territory, so whatever you hear from this point forward, it's your own fault. The game fleshes out a fair share of characters from the series. The Arkham games gave us some of the most iconic versions of villains, and to a lesser extent, variants of heroes. But a lot of them were never the focal point. Plenty of these characters wound up being underutilized or underdeveloped. In a lot of cases, both. Ironically, Shadow shines a light on the lesser-loved elements of the franchise, putting an emphasis on characters who were always present, but weren't always necessarily necessary. World-building by recontextualizing relationships and fleshing out a roster of rogues. One of the many characters made more important is Harleen. She may not be Harley yet, but Dr. Quinzel is still shown to have some Harlequin-like tendencies. While she attempts to put forward a professional persona, she can still be very reactive and incredibly impulsive, and loud and confrontational and just overall Harley-like. While her tenure is plentiful with problems, including but not limited to getting too close to patients, and misplacing a lot of blame on Batman, overall she's shown to be a good doctor in a very bad place, always having the best intentions even when those around her don't. Dr. Quinzel was a well-meaning doctor trying to get her patients to work through problems, and more importantly, trying to stop others from causing them more problems, standing up to her colleagues and bosses at Arkham when they attempted to use inmates as lab rats. While the series follows the same story beats of first making her a victim of a villain, and then making her that villain's sidekick, a future this game even hints at.
Maybe I should wear a mask like this. Then everyone would know who I am.
I don't recommend it.
Prior to her transformation, she was a genuinely good person who cared deeply for those around her. She wasn't always just the Joker's sidekick. And speaking of the Joker, he's here. And he speaks. The character's been a constant fixture in these games. He's either always being the big bad, or eventually being revealed to be the big bad somewhere along the way. Luckily, this game doesn't make the mistake of overutilizing an already overused character. This time around, the character is a cameo, placed in the cell next to Bruce's in Blackgate. And despite never being seen, the Clown Prince of Crime can still somehow see through Batman's disguise, recognizing the Caped Crusader through concrete. They incorporated the character, they made him feel important without making him feel important to the story that's being told. But that has very little bearing on everything else going on. Lyle Bolton is a former Batman fanboy, someone who is inspired by him, but has outgrown his influence. Bolton builds Batman up in his mind as this big bad brutalizer. And when Batman doesn't live up to the reputation Lyle's seen for him, he decides to purge his fixation.
To kill me.
Bolton is also a reminder of what Batman could become. A Batman without hope. A Batman without humanity. Without compassion, without mercy. Someone who isn't a hero or even a vigilante. Someone who's just a punisher, punishing anyone who doesn't agree with his approach. Bolton is deeply unnerved and quite frankly, frightening. I think that deep down, this is what Alfred was always worried about Bruce turning into. He's a cautionary tale about what could happen when a man seeks justice, acting as judge, jury, and executioner. There is so much going on in this game that there's plenty to easily miss, such as the subtle inclusion of Batman's sidekick. A pre-Robin but still masked Dick Grayson debuts, acting as one of the Rat King's many rats. Batman interrogates the young man before taking off and looking for Shrike, who is a lesser-known Nightwing villain that has some ties to Dick Grayson in some continuities. The game also makes mention of the fall of the Flying Graysons in Haley's Circus. As a matter of fact, Grayson is shown wearing the jacket, which is not a great way of concealing your identity. That would be like Bruce Wayne showing up for a photo shoot of a magazine with his cape and cowl. Like, come on, dude, I like the jacket too, but there's a time and a place. The character is referenced once more at the end of the game, as during the credits we can hear Leslie Tompkins tell Bruce that he should visit him, setting up an inevitable partnership. And I can't wait to see this duo. Something tells me that they're gonna be dynamic. Having said all that, it is weird seeing this be the route that they're taking with this character, because to me it feels much more of an appropriate story to run with the series' second Robin, Jason Todd. But then again, this series seems to have the mantra of right story, wrong Robin, as the franchise ends with the marriage of Barbara Gordon and Tim Drake. The characterization of Crane isn't any different here, even if the voice actor is. As always, it's a new game and a new Scarecrow, with Elijah Wood acting as the man behind the mask, before that man actually began wearing his mask. The game presents the character just as you'd probably imagine, a creepy, frail man infatuated with the concept of fear. It's very largely the same here. However, the game does a very good job of justifying this trait, showcasing that his obsession with fear comes from his own psychological beliefs. The soon-to-be Scarecrow subscribes to the Jungian shadow theory, which essentially means that there's two halves of a person. There's the ego, which is what people believe themselves to be and try to get others to believe them to be, and the shadow, what people don't wish to acknowledge that they are. It's significantly deeper than that. This is just a surface-level description. The series' subtitle is perfectly emulated in the duality of all those involved in the story. I mean, there's a literal level that sees Batman have to face himself. How much more on the nose can you get? The game's focal point is presented in flashback, highlighting the long-term friendship of Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent. A friendship that at most has only lightly been referenced over the years in this continuity, if even that. Arkham Shadow shows the bond the two share, likening them more to brothers than best friends. Both came from relatively broken homes. With Bruce's parents passing and Harvey's father issues, it kinda made the two count on each other when they had no one else. Living through somewhat similar situations at the same time brought the two together during their pivotal years. I think a lot of the time, even outside this continuity, this friendship winds up being implied. It's become part of the mythos over the years, so people just assume it into scripts, even when there's no backing in that continuity whatsoever.
Yes, of course you're right, Bruce. Thank you. You've always been a good friend.
There are always mentions of the two's former friendship, but very rarely is it ever actually shown. Rarely is it ever made an important plot point. And here, it is maybe the most important plot point. The game remembers the tragedy of Two-Face. It remembers that underneath those scars and Scarface-like crime is a well-meaning, good-hearted, tortured, and troubled person. Someone who could be every bit as good as he has been bad. I wouldn't say that the other games in the series forgot this. I just think that there was never really a chance to showcase the nuance of this character. He was already sharing the spotlight with so many others at the time, a lot of which were much more integral to what was going on at the time. Arkham Shadow gave much needed depth to what should always be a three-dimensional character, with two faces. Arkham Shadow also showcases a lot of the lesser spoken aspects of Harvey's past. More often than not, it goes completely unmentioned that Harvey's ailment is actually genetic. Like his father before him, he's plagued with a secondary personality, one that makes him lash out and act abusive, going from man to monster in a matter of moments. As the game puts a lot of focus on Harvey Dent and his upbringing, it shouldn't surprise many that the game also ends with his turn into Two-Face. Though the circumstances surrounding his transformation are now more closely tied with the titular hero. During the trial of Matches Malone, Dr. Crane attempts to dose Malone, but Bruce smacks the device he's using out of his hands, causing it to explode and badly burn Harvey as a result. It's a shocking scene that I didn't see coming, though in hindsight, I probably should have. As if that reveal wasn't shocking enough for the character, it's then shortly thereafter revealed that Harvey's alternate personality has been playing Puppet Master. The game's main antagonist, the mythical Rat King who is heard but never seen, is none other than Harvey, coming apart at the seams during his campaign. This whole time, he's secretly been one of his own pawns. This also isn't the first time that Two-Face's alter took on a vigilante-like identity, because the new Batman adventures would see a new twist in his tragic tale. In addition to being Two-Face, Harvey later becomes the Judge, a righteous villain looking to punish Gotham's criminal underworld, deciding the fate of Batman's rogues gallery. Not entirely unlike the Rat King here. Though I will say, surprisingly, I think I like this story beat more here than there. If only because, rather than being a new development to further muddy up the story, here it's the starting point and a side effect of Harvey's second personality. And I think in terms of narrative, it plays out better this way, in my opinion. But I think the biggest twist with this character, and in this game, and maybe even overall in the series, has to come at the end. The whole time Batman's at Blackgate as Matches, he doesn't make a whole lot of friends. The one person in there who winds up being relatively friendly is an older man named Joe. I mean, he's not a great guy by any means. He's shown to be just as corrupt as everyone else in there, but he's a good enough guy compared to everyone else in there. Joe is a surprisingly friendly, well-meaning old man. One who has a somewhat pleasant demeanor despite being in a mostly unpleasant place. While he's not all that vocal about his past, what is obvious is his shame of it, looking defeated whenever his past actions have been brought up. He feels so awful for his moral failings that when confronted by death later in the game, he welcomes it as a punishment. Still, he's the one patient in the unit who seems to have found some success in his sessions, even encouraging Dr. Quinzel when she was being reprimanded. While Bruce is in Blackgate, Joe treats him very well, becoming a self-appointed mentor to Matches Malone. Except, as it turns out, this guy is none other than Joe Chill, the man who murdered Bruce's parents. Now this reveal is huge. However, this didn't go without hints. There are several tells throughout the tale, like when Joe says this to an approaching Matches.
But don't be a hero.
That's what happens when you try to be a hero.
And don't resort to violence. That's an alley you don't want to go down.
Or later, when Matches mentions his parents passing and how they were murdered before his eyes, Joe can't stand to look at him when he talks about his tragedy, turning in his seat in shame. Harvey and Bruce's friendship began the night his parents were killed. Harvey watched Bruce live through that heartbreak, and in his time of tragedy, Harvey promised Bruce that one day his parents' killer would have to answer to them. And when given that information, a plan which Harvey intends to see through. At the end of Arkham Shadow, Harvey confronts Chill, ready to take his life in the name of justice, enacting a vengeance he promised to a brother, only to then have his Machiavellian scheme stopped by the very man he tried to vindicate. Just as Two-Face is about to pull the trigger against Batman's request, Bruce does the unthinkable. He takes off his mask to reveal his identity to Harvey. Meaning that this whole time, through all these years, through all of these games, Harvey has always known. Joe Chill frantically tries to apologize to a maskless Batman, saving his life but not forgiving him for taking the lives of his parents. Joe leaves the two best friends alone by the bat signal. Looking for a sense of finality, Harvey tries to end things, only to be saved by his friend. Ultimately, the former district attorney realizes that in spite of the horrors he's seen, this isn't the end of Harvey, it's the beginning of Two-Face. The game's underlining theme is identity, confronting the darker aspects and learning of the lighter ones in one. The most obvious case, of course, is Harvey, who ultimately becomes the physical representation of Dr. Crane's beliefs. The ego and the shadow physically manifesting, split right down the middle. A man who's good at heart but troubled and tormented by his deepest, darkest desires that make themselves known against his will, that make themselves present, and at times keep him absent. In the end, Harvey learns to accept both sides of himself, and together, the two form the foe Two-Face. While alternate personalities are absent for the rest of the cast, the characters still suffer from their own unique identity issues. Joe Chill has spent his life running from his shadow, burdened by awful acts and unspeakable sins that only a god can forgive. He knows the harm that he's done, the lives he's taken, the life he ruined. Joe is deeply ashamed of those parts of himself and horrified by his own actions, trying his best to be a beacon of positivity despite wallowing in his own justified self-hatred. The someday Scarecrow gets Bruce to confront his own other half, desperately trying to get the Dark Knight to neglect his intellect and give in to his instinct, to take the lives of those who take lives. And we see that Bruce wants to. I mean, he does. He really, really does. But he doesn't. The game makes it clear that there's a visceral vigilante in there, one who wants to punish criminals to the fullest extent. Batman wants to kill, or at least parts of Batman want to kill, but he doesn't. He can't. He fights the urge. Even when his parents' killer is placed before him with a gun to his head, he doesn't give in. He saves the man who is the sole reason he saves others. And I really like this development, because it shows that Batman isn't an angel. He's not Superman. He's not the perfect Boy Scout. Batman wants to brutalize. He does have those urges. He does have those impulses. His moral compass stops him. His belief in justice trumps his need for revenge. And that's actually kind of beautiful. Each of these men, all three that I listed, all three that share the final scene of this game together, are tied to the title. They each have their own shadows, and they each have their own way of dealing with it. Harv combines the two sides of himself to make one, becoming the worst best him he could be. Joe tries to suppress his shadow, hiding from it more often than not, acknowledging that it's there, but never accepting it, while Bruce fights his shadow. Literally, but metaphorically, most importantly, constantly fighting off the worst elements of Bruce in an effort to be the best Batman he could be. Not for himself, but for the city he protects, for the people that he inspires. Batman Arkham Shadow is surprisingly good and refreshingly great. I didn't think I'd be able to say that I like this game, let alone tell you that I actually kinda love it. After the last entry into the Arkham universe, a part of me felt like the day had come to put this brand to bed. I didn't feel like there was anything more that could be done, and I didn't feel like there was anything more I wanted to see done. But Arkham Shadow had a story that was worth telling, and one I'm glad I got to experience. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that this outing has restored my faith in the franchise, and I genuinely look forward to seeing what the future brings. So with that being said, if you like this video and would maybe want to see me take a look back at the rest of the Arkham universe, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Face, he's off to Arkham.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.